Yeah.
Mine's more of a comment.
Sure.
Reading just a few chapters of your book so far, you just got books the other day, it just struck me as interesting from where we are in Benton County. I don't know how it is around the rest of the state, but we are very much like the frontier people in Benton County in our idea of government, that family and neighborhoods should be the deciding forces rather than. So it was kind of striking to me to see that even so many years after the Northwest Territory establishment, that we still have a lot of the ideologies there.
Oh, for me, look, I'm just a geek. I like history, okay? But part of the reason I also like history is that I think you figure out you're not reinventing the wheel all the time. And if you look in the past and you see that, hey, wait a minute, these people are arguing about many of the same things that we're still arguing about today, reading what they have to say and the way they deal with it is more interesting. I don't know whether it's more useful or not, but you suddenly realize, the conflict that you're describing in my lifetime, for example, and I'm 53 years old, the huge change would be very much what we've just seen happening here, which is a very powerful federal government in the 1960s, 50s, well, particularly the 60s and 70s, based upon the principle that you had to have a government to keep people from discriminating against each other, that you had to have a government that comes in and keeps people so that you can have an equal playing ground, so that women can participate, all these other things. And you see this growing populist, very powerful resistance to that around the issues of taxes and local control happening all over again. Now, if you look at American history as a whole, you would say that what would happen is that since the way the U.S. just tends to go is you tend to lurch back and forth. So in the late 18th century, government was very powerful. Then in the Jeffersonian period, the Jacksonian period, it gets very weak. Then it gets stronger again, and then weaker. Is that at some point people will again see the value of government. And they'll say, are we willing to pay more money in order for that government? Just as a historian, not as a particular person, I wonder about things like this bridge collapse in Minnesota, where people are going to say, hey, wait a minute, if things are falling apart, do I want to pay a couple $100s more a year to make sure that they don't fall apart? Now, you have to believe that the government will spend the money wisely, but do you see what I mean? Katrina, I think, was a huge example. And if you're asking me just as an analyst, I would say that Katrina was more important in George Bush's problems than Iraq is in many ways, because the government lost legitimacy to some extent. People said, hey, government, you're supposed to take care of us. And they're not doing it. Now, the state of Louisiana also failed them, and the city of New Orleans also failed them. But, so will we have a debate over the next 5 or 6 years where people go around and they say, look, airports don't work anymore, the airline industry is a mess, public education is falling apart, roads and so on don't work. All of this stuff that was built in the 60s, the infrastructure, is falling apart. And you're patching it here and there. Or do you need to spend massive amounts of money and rebuild it all? I think that's going to be a debate. Healthcare is another example that's going to take place in your guys' lifetimes. In the next 20 or 30 years, those are going to be the central, assuming the United States is still here and all that other kind of stuff. With terrorism, you don't know. That's the whole point about history. But assuming to the extent that we can predict it, I would think you're going to be spending much of your life voting and thinking about exactly these issues. To what extent am I willing to cede local control and pay more money in order to have a government that is able to provide, the sense that as I start driving across the country and I go onto this bridge, it's going to stand up. That's what legitimacy is all about. If bridges started collapsing all over the United States, at some point people would say, hey, there's something seriously wrong here, right? And then at that point, you might get some significant change in government. That's when revolutions happen, is when people say, this just doesn't work anymore. It's not just that Bill Clinton's a jerk or George Bush is a jerk. It's that the whole system doesn't seem to be functioning in a way that makes sense. That's what produced the American Revolution. Anything else? Yeah?
Real quick, something we saw from this thing, we just bring up a bridge collapse, is in Marietta they brought up how you couldn't pay the American Revolutionary War veterans, no money. But so they gave them land because we had lots of land.
Exactly.
But now we're in the issue where bridge collapses, wars, terrorism, and that. But we have $9 trillion debt. So in terms of I worry about this generation, mine too, when you're going to repair the infrastructure. I mean, back then, they had the foresight to say, we have no money, we can't do this. But today, we keep writing IOUs.
Yes. Except that the federal government was in debt to the tune of $100 million in 1789, left over from the War of Independence they couldn't pay off. And so the same, $100 million in 1790 was a ton of money. And Alexander Hamilton, the Secretary of the Treasury, came up with this scheme where he funded the federal debt, and he decided that a debt was not a bad thing. And he turned it into an investment and got people to buy bonds and all the other kind of stuff that helped the government work. But that again goes to the point I was making with somebody else earlier, that when you study history, you're not just studying a bunch of dead people. You're also studying people who are grappling, okay, we founded a country, we say we're committed to Republican government, we want to develop this country, but we owe tons of money. We got people who are suspicious of us, who don't trust us, and who don't want to pay taxes, and who want to make sure their kids are like them. Now, how do we maneuver through that? That's the challenge then. It's the challenge now. Yes.
On the taxes, did they start like in the Northwest Territory? Did they pay taxes when it was still territory?
They paid property taxes, land taxes.
Okay.
But see, a good example. Do you tax trade? Do you tax land? Do you tax income? Okay, let's go to the legislature and say we want to tax land. Who's going to get annoyed? Everybody, especially large landowners who would have been the corporate capitalists of the 1790s. No. Tax trade. Okay, you tax trade. Who's going to get upset? Merchants. So, there's certain support for Sinclair in the Northwest Territory. Many people don't want to become a state. You know who those people tended to be? People who didn't want to become a state, who liked being in the Northwest Territory? No. People who were merchants in Cincinnati. Because they were very afraid that when Worthington and his pals took over, where was all of Worthington's money? Just look around you. It's in land. He owned this hill. Okay, he doesn't want to pay taxes. So when he and his pals get in power in 1803 in the legislature and they're going to pass taxes, what are they going to pass the taxes on? Trade. If you're a merchant in Cincinnati, to hell with you, Bozo Worthington. You see? I mean, that's the problem that you get into. Anytime you try and do anything, it's like an example today, you guys hear about pork barrel politics and all this other kind of stuff. And we're trying to do away with it. It's an American tradition. It's been there since the beginning. Because people say, building a hospital or a bridge in my town is a great use of federal tax money. Building a hospital or town in Denver, Colorado is fraud and inefficiency. And people in Denver, Colorado are saying, hey, wait a minute, this is great for us. And the people in Alabama, and so if you are a federal politician, I don't admire most of those guys, but I wouldn't want to be one of them because you've got to try and somehow or another sort of say to everybody, you're all going to get a little bit of the pie, which of course doesn't work out. All right, guys. Well, thank you for being patient with me, and good luck with the rest of your time. And if any of you ever come to Miami University, make sure you come and say hello. Okay?